Welcome back again. What we're going to be playing with today is we're going to be playing a little bit more with UIKit. We're going to be finishing up our Scorekeeper app that we started last time. What you should have done before coming to class today is you should have read Chapter 5 for auto rotation and auto resizing. There were a couple really good examples in there about auto rotating. The first example was actually using Interface Builder to move things around with Interface Builder. It was a really good example. Anytime you can use Interface Builder to do your rotations, by all means do that. The second one was probably what I consider the most important of the three examples. The second one was this one that I've got up here. And what it did is it did an auto rotation, but then it actually fixed in code where the frames of each of these views were located. And that kind of ends up being the most important feature that you can really learn when it comes to auto rotation. So that one was important. Then the last one was it had two different views. That one's a neat option. There is a little extra overhead with it that I didn't care for personally. So this is the one that I end up using in my apps a lot. So I thought I'd show it. Cool. So what we're doing today is we are focusing on finishing up the iPhone portion of the Scorekeeper app. So we're going to play with it today. So go ahead and open up Xcode. And let's go ahead and open up the project that we were working on yesterday. It should be called Scorekeeper. Mine's called Scorekeeper Video because I've had two of them. And what we finished off with yesterday is that we finished off with a nice, pretty screen that you can click on the buttons, but they don't do anything. You can click in the areas, but nothing's really wired up yet. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start making some of those connections, start wiring up some things. So the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out what connections we need to make, what actions we need to make as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an action for when the button's pressed, both buttons, so there's going to be two actions. We're also going to take an action whenever the text field did end on exit. It turns out we're gonna typically use a numeric keypad which doesn't have a return key, which I think is a real shame. But we're gonna go ahead and make the did end on exit change anyway, and at some point we'll swap out the keyboard just so you can see your options there. So there's those actions. There's also going to be an action where if you click the background, the keyboard's going to go away. So there's a button, and then removing the keyboard in a few different ways. As for outlets, we're going to need an outlet to this label so we can change it. We're going to need an outlet to all these text fields. And then we're also going to need an outlet to these text views. One thing we're not going to do in this app is we're not going to have an outlet to these text view names. These are just going to be on the screen. People can change them, and that's great. One weakness of our app, I'm just going to tell you in advance, is we don't have a good way for the keyboard to go away on those because we need to use a delegate, which I didn't want to use delegates in this example. So one shortcoming of this app is that it's going to only, the keyboard's not going to go away unless like you click on the background. So hitting the return key there, so that's going to be a shortcoming. We'll get to it later. Also, I wasn't planning on doing auto rotation with this app, but we probably could. I'll leave that as an example for you to do. So let's go ahead and start making outlets so that we can connect to some of these things. Making outlets gets a little tedious, but you kind of get used to it. It's easy. So we're going to say we're going to make an outlet to a UI label. So we got a pointer to a UI label. And then we're going to make pointers for all the different text fields. So we're just going to say player 1 text field. And then we're going to have a 2, 3, and 4 text field. And then we're also going to make connections to their list of scores. We're going to have a player 1 scores text view. So this is where their scores are going to get updated. And then we need properties for all of our IVARs. Well, all of these IVARs, I should say. And they need to be IB outlets. So it gets a little tedious after a while. But we've got, now at this point, we've got something that we can connect to Interface Builder for all of the outlets that we need. We also need the various actions. So we need an action for pressed enter scores button. I'll tell you what, I'll leave off the word button. We also need one for pressing the reset button. And then we're also going to need one to remove the keyboard. I'll just say keyboard. Sometimes it's a keypad, sometimes it's a keyboard, but I'm just going to say remove keyboard. So these are the outlets and the actions that we're going to use. Let's go ahead and implement a couple of these, just because some of them are pretty easy. Let's go ahead and grab the IB actions first, and let's paste these over. One thing I like to do with my IB actions is I like to make sure they're make sure they're happening. So I like to put a little log message in here. And I'm going to show you a little trick that I use a lot. I really like using this little trick. So this is, I say %s, so that's going to give me a C string that's going to go in here. And then there's this magic little thing called underscore underscore function, where function is all uppercase, underscore underscore. And what that does is it just gives you a C string of whatever function you're in. In fact, it's so handy that sometimes that's all you really need to print out. So I'll have little messages like this that just print out what function I'm in. And they're nice because you can just copy and paste them in different places and you know that you're inside that function. Actually, remove keyboard is so easy. We could probably just type it in right here. What it's going to do is it's going to take the text fields and resign first responder for them. One of the text fields, at most one, is going to be the first responder, but there's no real harm in calling resign first responder for all of them, because if they're not first responder, nothing bad happens. But if one of them is first responder, it's going to resign it, and that'll make the keyboard go away, which is kind of a neat thing. So that's our remove keyboard function. We just went ahead and wrote it, even though we won't need it for a little while. Let's go ahead and do some more busy work. So each property needs to be synthesized. So I'm just going to paste it in here. When you synthesize things, you could do it all in one line. So you could say like synthesize, round number, label, comma, and then the others. But to be honest, I typically just do each on its own line. And the only reason I do that is because with my copy-paste machine, it works out a little easier. There's surely on the internet somewhere somebody's got a little auto code generator thing for this busy work. When somebody finds a good one, let me know. So I synthesized all my properties. Next up is any property that has a retain keyword, or a copy keyword for that matter. You need to release it in your dealloc method. So each one we've got to go through and we've got to release. So I'm going to release my label, and then I'll copy that. I'll release my text fields, and I'll release my text views. It's really annoying when you make a mistake when you're doing all this. One thing I'll tell you is if you make a mistake, try to comment it out instead of delete it, or if you change your mind, I should say. just because I've definitely like made things, deleted them, and then realized I needed them back. One more thing we need to do is, since this is a view controller, so view controllers, sometimes if you're in a multi-view system, your view is not on the screen, and if a view is not on the screen and you run into a memory problem, the system will automatically dump that view for you. So they'll dump the view, and it'll call this function view did unload. But if we have a retain on some of the objects, then they won't go away. But really we would like, if we run into a memory problem, we'd like for these things to go away. So anything that will get remade, if the view comes back on screen, it'll load the nib again, it'll call view did load. And so anything that gets remade, you would like to go ahead and get rid of it during view did unload. And the way we do that is we set it to nil. By setting it to nil, it releases the old one, so it can free up the memory. Obviously, again, in this application, that's not going to happen unless it's in the background and somebody else needs the space. So we're going to go ahead and set these to nil because it's good practice. So it gets a little tedious because you end up with 5 places. You make the IVAR, you make a property for the IVAR, so that's 2. You synthesize it, there's 3. You release it, there's 4. And then since it's in a view controller and their view did unload, there's 5. So you end up with 5 places everywhere you make one of these changes. So let's go ahead and save it up, and let's make some of these connections in the zip file. So coming into the scorekeeper view zip file, we've now in Files Owner got a lot of things that we need to connect. So I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to start dragging to things. This one's my label. This is my Player 1 text field, my Player 2 text field, 3, 4, and then my scores for Player 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then my buttons, I want touch up inside to be connected. For this one's going to be inner scores. And then this one's going to be reset scores. And then I want to go ahead and connect did end on exit to remove the keyboard. And so if somebody presses the return key, it's going to remove the keyboard. Sadly, these are numeric pads right now, so there is no return key. But I'm connecting it anyway, because someday I might change the keyboard. Actually, just so we can see it, let's change the keyboard on one of them. I'm going to make the first keyboard be the default keyboard. So it will have a return key, and then these others will be number pads. This is for example purposes only. Don't do this in a real app. Another thing we want to do, this one's kind of subtle, is we would like for a background click to make the keyboard go away. This is something that I learned from the book, and I thought, hey, that was really clever. But you can see that the UI view by default doesn't have the control methods, right? So it doesn't have a touch down. However, a UI control does, and a UI control is a subclass of a UI view. So anything a UI view can do, a UI control can also do. So instead of making it a view, we switch the class type. So hit Command 4. We switch the class to a UI control, so it can do everything a view can do, but it's also got these events, which is kind of clever. And the event that we want in this case is touch down. So if somebody touches in the background, we want that to remove the keyboard as well. I thought that was really clever whenever I saw the book did that. It's like, oh yeah, that's genius. Great, so we've made all of our connections. The way you can check off all your connections are made is you can go to Files Owner, and you can see that everybody is connected. The only one that's not connected is the Search Display Controller. That's something built into view controllers that we don't need. And all my buttons are connected. And then I've got all of my remove keyboard things connected as well. and then this bottom one here is the background view, the view, which is now called control, removing the keyboard as well. So we've made our connections, and so what we should be able to do at this point is we should be able to see some of this stuff happen. So if I bring this up over here and then I bring up my console log, I should be able to click on buttons and it should say pressed enter. You can see it says the function and then it says whatever I had in it. This one will just say the function, so just press reset. If I click in the background, it should say remove keyboard. Also, if the keyboard is up and I click here, it should actually remove the keyboard. The other one we connected is did end on exit. So this one, if I hit the return key, you can see that that clears the keyboard. Sadly, the number pad doesn't have a remove keyboard or return key. Personally, I think that was a mistake by Apple, but I don't make these decisions. So the only way you can get the number pad to go away is to click in the background. I don't think that's intuitive enough for users, to be honest, but I mean, I don't make these things. The one shortcoming of our app, I've told you about this already, is that the text views, you can change them, but at present, you don't have a link to make the keyboard go away, and that's because you do it with you do it with a delegate, and we're not doing that just yet. So if you want the keyboard to go away, you have to click. Oops, actually, you know what? You have to click in a text field, and then the keyboard will go away. We could make that a little better, but we're not gonna today. Also, if you rotate, it doesn't do any rotations at present, and that's expected. Cool. So we've got our connections ready. When we click them, it calls the function, but nothing actually happens just yet. So let's start writing what's going to go into some of these functions. Somebody presses enter scores. What we want to do is we want to update the score for each player. We also want to update the round number label. So what we need to do is we need to have some type of running score for each player. So what we want to do is we want to make an iVar that shows each player's score. So player 1 score, player 2, player 3, player 4. So this is just going to keep their total score. Objective-C is a superset of C, so you can just say int if you'd like. If you'd like to make it slightly more, Objective-C looking, you can say ns integer. If you command click on it, you can see that an ns integer is just defined as an int. So saying ns integer and int is pretty much the same. The one difference is that if you're on a 32-bit system, it'll define it as a long, so it guarantees that it's a 64-bit, regardless of what platform you're on. Actually, that's not quite true. It guarantees that it uses the most natural size for that platform. So if it's a 64-bit machine, it'll use a 64-bit value. So it uses the natural block size for that machine is what it actually does. So what the heck, we'll say ns integer for all of them instead of just int. Potentially it'll help you down the road someday, but for this app it didn't matter. Also, while we're here, we also want to make a round number. The round number starts at 0 and goes up, so I'm going to make it an NSU integer. That just stands for unsigned integer, so it just makes it an unsigned. Do we need to make it unsigned? No. The difference is, I mean, whether we can count over 32,000 rounds or not, right? We don't care. So these are iVars. Now it turns out that we've got to decide, do we want to make properties for these iVars or not? We're going to continue to talk more about properties, but I'll go ahead and say now properties do 3 things for you. first and foremost, they take care of memory management for you. That's the main reason I use properties. But you notice that there is no star in here, right? And that's because these are not pointers to objects. These are just primitive types. These are just ints, right? So there is no memory management concern. So we don't need a property for that reason. The second reason we might want a property is because properties make things publicly available. Other people could change them. To be honest, we don't want that, and a lot of the times you don't want that, so we don't really need that. Then the third thing that properties let you do is properties let you use the dot notation. So anytime you say like self dot something, that's, you know that that's a property anytime you see the dot notation. So those are the three things that properties do for you, and we don't really need any of those things. If we did want a property, by the way, it would probably just look like this. So player 1 score. So it would look like this. So we wouldn't have the retain keyword because it's not an object that can be retained, so we'd just leave it out. We don't want an outlet because it's not hooked up in the interface builder. And in fact, with primitives, the word non-atomic doesn't even really matter either. So I think you can actually just leave that out, and you can just say property integer. I usually put the non-atomic. But at any rate, we don't need them at all here. So they're just going to be variables that we have access to. Alright, so what we want to do with each one is we want to update the score. So we want to say player 1 score equals, or what we're actually going to do is we're going to increment it. So we're going to say plus equals. We're going to increment it by a certain amount. The amount we're going to increment it by is whatever is in his text field. So we're going to say self.player1 text field view. If we want to learn more about the text field view, we can bring up help. I bring up help by hitting Shift Option Command question. It's a whole bunch of keys, but it's the one that I use most of the time. If we want to see stuff about the UI text field, you can see that there's a text object, text property, sorry. And that text property is an NS string. So we want to get that text property. So now what we really want is we don't want an NS string, we want an integer, right? So what we can do is we can look into the NS string class reference, and if we want to get a numeric value from it, there are a couple different tasks, a couple different methods you can use for getting numeric values. And so the one that we want is we want this int value. So we want to get the int value of a string, and so it gives you the integer representation of that string. It also lets you know that if it's not an integer, if it doesn't begin with a valid decimal, it's going to return 0. So just so you know. And so we want the int value of that string. So this will tell us what number is in that text field. Then we're going to take that number and we're going to do a plus equals on player score. So if player score is 100 and in here is 5, it'll bring that total up to 105. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do that for all the players. So players 2, 3, and 4. Really, you should probably test something before you mass produce it, but we'll just go ahead and mass produce it now. And so that gets the new score for each player. And then what I should have said on here is we need to update the view in the text view. So what we've actually done here is we've affected the model objects. The model in this is so simple, it's part of the view controller. But then the next thing we want to do is we want to update the view. So what we want to affect here is we want to change the player 1 scores text view. If we look up things about text fields, it's probably no shock to you that it has a property called text. So we're going to set the text. And now we'll get into a little bit more Objective-C stuff. What we're going to set the text to is we're going to set it to an NS string. So you can see that the text property is an NS string. You're going to use strings a lot. And in order to create a string object, what we're going to do is we're going to use a class method. So NSString is a class. It has a class method called stringWithFormat. If we wanted to go into the help on that, it's got a stringWithFormat. And the stringWithFormat, what it does is it returns an auto-released object. So we could find it in here somewhere. It returns an auto-released object of an NS string, and it lets you use the formatted print string options. So what we want to do is we want to use this format. I'm going to type it in first, and then I'm going to talk about it. And so we're going to put in whatever was there before. Player 1 score. So whatever was there before, and then we're going to add the new score. So let's look at what we got here. So we've got a formatted string coming. So we start it with the @ symbol. That says here comes an NS string. If you'd left off the @ symbol, it would just use a plain old C string, and that would crash and burn in bad ways. So we say, hey, here comes an NS string. The format that we're going to use is we're going to use %at. This is going to use the description method. So here, this is an NS string. An NS string has a description method, which just prints it out in a nice, easy to read form. So we're going to say whatever was there before. And then we're going to say \n, so that's a new line character. This is pretty standard C stuff if you've got a C background. And then on the next line, we're going to print out the player 1 score, so we use %t. So there are 3 tokens in here, what it was before, new line, and then what the current score is. And so we're going to need to do this for all the different scores. And I need to make sure we print out the appropriate score for each one. And let's see if we've done anything useful, right? Because you type a bunch of code and then you want to see if you've done anything or not. So what I want to do is I want to put in scores for each person. Oh, and this keyboard will be different, just because that's how we set it. Nice thing about this keyboard is it's got a return on it, so I can make the keyboard go away. And then whenever I enter the round scores, currently it'll say all zeros in the first line, and then I want it to say those scores on the next line down. You can see that we're making good progress. There's still a few things that I'd like to change though. And those things are, I'd like for the scores to get cleared off after I hit enter scores. I'd like for it to increment it, and then I'd like for them to go away, right? So I don't really need them to still be up. But you can see that scores are getting added. One nice thing is that you can scroll these as well. There's some things that we could change to this app to make it better. They should really all kind of scroll together, right? And we could change that to make it better. But in order to do that, we'd need to learn how to use the UI scroll view delegate. And we're not quite there yet, right? So we're making a simple app. And there are a few things we could fix. Some things we will fix is it'd be nice for this top line to not show 0. And we'll fix those things. But first we need to do things like reset score doesn't do anything. The round number wasn't going up. So we've still got plenty to fix. So let's do this. Let's do a couple more things. Let's go ahead and update the round number. So the round number, I went ahead and I made an NS integer for that. And so I just need to make it go 1 higher. So I use plus plus. It's a superset of C, so if C can do it, Objective-C can do it. And I want to take the round number labels text, and I want to make it be a string with format, and I want it to say round %D, and I'm just going to print out the round number. So this is just going to increment the round number, and then it's going to update the label to that new value. And then one thing I decided I also wanted to do is I wanted to clear the text fields whenever somebody hits enter round scores, and that's fairly easy to do. We just say player 1 text field text, clear it out. So we'll just clear out all 4. So now whenever something is put up or put on the screen, it'll clear out those text fields. So let's give it a go again, and let's see if it does all these things. So we're going to go ahead and give this one 33, that one 1, that one 1, and that one 1. And then whenever I hit enter round scores, it's going to clear these off. It's also going to increment the round number. So it looks like the round number is going up, so that's a good thing. So you can see that things seem to be working, and so it's clearing these off at the end of each round, which is what I wanted. Obviously, in a real app, you'd use the same keyboard for all 4 of these. I should probably change this keyboard to match, but cool. Next thing I want to do is I want to have reset scores do something useful. I like for it to reset the round. And then I like for it to also reset all of these. So we can go ahead and do that. So some of the things we want reset scores to do is we want it to go through and just take each player score and set it to 0. And then we're going to take the round, and we're actually going to reset it to 0 as well. We're going to want it to start on round 1, but for now I'm going to say round 0, and you'll see why here in a little bit. So if we do this and we run it, and so if we have some scores in here and we hit reset, it did actually reset, but it didn't change the view, right? So you can see that, like, if I give him a score of 2 here, you know, it went from 1 to 2. So it did reset, but it didn't change the view. So not changing the view is, you know, pretty important. So what we want to do is we actually kind of want this reset button to kind of do all of these things, right? So we'd like for it to do all of these update tasks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out some of the common things, and I'm going to make myself a little helper function. So I'm just going to call it update view. This is really similar to what we did with the sliders. And I'll say that incrementing the scores should probably only happen when you enter scores. But this part of updating the score field would be nice to do everywhere. Incrementing the round number and displaying that'd be good to do everywhere. Clearing off the text fields, that'd be a good one. So I'm going to cut it out of here, and I'm going to put it into update view. And all I have to do is I just have to say, I have to call update view. So this function is still exactly the same. I just am calling another function to do some of these tasks. And likewise, what I'd like to do is when I hit reset, I'd like to do an update as well. One thing that's different with reset is that I'd like to take all of the score text field text, and I'd like to start off cleared off. So I'm going to clear each of them off, and then I'm going to go ahead and call self.updateView. And the only reason I'm doing that is because it'll update the round number for me, so it'll go from 0 to 1. It'll put a 0 in all of these columns, and then it'll also clear off the text field. So I just kind of put some of that common functionality inside update view. So now if I have some scores, and so I'm in round 3 at present, then I can choose to hit reset, and it'll take us back to the beginning. Some things didn't work out as well as I wanted. It says round 1 to start with, which I did kind of want, but I didn't actually like the way it printed these zeros. So let's do some things differently. So, I mean, you know, I kind of had an idea, but I wasn't happy with it. It turns out that this part, I think that this would be better left into here, to be honest. And then if we wanted to here, we could just make it say 0 kind of manually, if we'd like. And then there's a few other things that you could certainly fix up. So if we give a couple of scores here, and then when you hit reset, it should clear it off. One thing that I'd like to fix is I'd like for it to start off saying round 1. So I'd kind of like for it to start off saying round 1. So what I'm going to do, there's a bunch of ways to fix it, is I'm going to get rid of these two because I don't need those. That's load view and init with nib name. But we're going to use load view. Our view did load all the time. I'm just going to go ahead and say update view right here. And so it should go ahead and show me round 1 right whenever I start. Other little things that you might want to use. Oops, this is simulator already in use. What's the simulator already in use all about? Other things that you might choose to fix if you like is I kind of like for it to say 0 across the top here, but whenever I put in a score, I'd kind of like for that zeros line to go away, right, personally. So if you wanted to put in like little fixes like that, you totally could. So if you wanted to put in a little fix like that, then let's say right here, if you want to get rid of those zeros, you could say if round number is 1. So if the round number is 1, then what I'd like to do is I'd like to get rid of that 0. So there used to be a 0 in there, but I just kind of wanted to get rid of it as well. And let's see here. Maybe it'd be even better if we just did an else if, or an else statement. There's all kinds of ways to solve problems like this. Not saying that this is a good solution. I'm just saying that it is a solution. And so maybe for round 1, we don't want the \n, we just want to put just the score in. Whenever I did this in practice, I found a more elegant solution, but this will get the job done. So you can play with things like this. Also, if you want to play with it for the lab, you could add things like trying to get, when you change names, for the keyboard to go away. The main thing that I definitely want for the lab is I'd like for, let's see if this works. Cool. So now whenever I put in that first round, it should get rid of the zeros for me. So for the lab, I definitely want you to make it work for the iPad. So that's important. I'd also like you to make sure things are formatted nicely. And I would very much welcome but not require you to implement auto rotation. That's something that you learned about in this chapter. Right now I could let it auto rotate. That part's easy. If you want it to auto rotate, all you have to do is you have to override the should auto rotate. For the iPhone, you really need to support everything except for portrait upside down. For the iPad in general, you want to support everything. So you could say support everything except for portrait upside down. Oops. Okay, made a random space. And then for the iPad, you should really support all the different views. However, at present, you can see that it doesn't really auto-rotate in a very good way. I lose my button, right? So if you choose to do an auto-rotate, you should probably rearrange some things. So for example, you should probably put like the round number over here, the inner scores over here, the button over here. So you should move those, and then you should slide everything else up. I think it'd be really great practice for you to do a little auto-rotation with your app as well. Cool, so that's all the farther we're going to take it. In the lab, get things up and running for the scorekeeper. What we're going to come back with next time is we're going to start playing with a tic-tac-toe app. I think this one's a really good example of trying to use the model view controller structure. So we're going to learn a lot about that. Also, just to give credit where credit's due, we're going to steal all these images from the follow-up book called More iPhone 3 Development. Also a great book. Once you finish with this one, start reading that one. Lots of good stuff. Cool, that's all we got for today. See you next time.